The first thing I noticed wasn't the sterile white ceiling or the steady beeping of machines. It was the smell, that unmistakable hospital antiseptic that seemed to coat the inside of my nostrils. But something was wrong. This wasn't the antiseptic I remembered. This was different, sharper, more modern. My eyes struggled to focus as I tried to make sense of my surroundings. The room was bathed in soft afternoon sunlight, streaming through vertical blinds, casting linear shadows across pale blue walls. Everything looked newer than I remembered hospitals looking. The monitors beside my bed displayed digital readouts in bright LED numbers, and there was a flat-screen television mounted on the wall, technology that seemed impossibly advanced. "She's awake," I heard someone say in a gentle voice. A nurse appeared in my peripheral vision, a middle-aged Hispanic woman with kind eyes and scrubs decorated with colorful cartoon characters I didn't recognize. "How are you feeling, Sarah?" Sarah. That was my name. Sarah Martinez. But hearing it felt strange, like putting on clothes that no longer fit quite right. "Where?" I tried to speak, but my throat felt like sandpaper. The nurse quickly brought a cup of water with a bendable straw to my lips. "You're in St. Mary's Hospital in Phoenix, Arizona," she said softly, studying my face carefully. "My name is Rosa. You've been unconscious for several days, but the doctors say you're going to be fine. Phoenix, Arizona." The words hit me like physical blows. This was wrong. All wrong. "What year is it?" I whispered, though I wasn't sure why that question had emerged from my lips. Rosa's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of concern crossing her features. "It's 2019, honey. July 15th, 2019. The water cup slipped from my trembling hands, ice cubes scattering across the sterile floor. 2019. That was impossible. It was 2009. It had been 2009 just yesterday? The day before? Time felt elastic and confusing in my mind. "I need to call my friends," I said, panic beginning to rise in my chest. "Jake, Emma, and Connor. We were on a road trip, Route 66. We were driving from Chicago to Los Angeles. They must be worried sick. We were supposed to meet up in Flagstaff yesterday." Rosa sat down in the chair beside my bed, her expression growing more concerned. "Sarah, I need you to try to stay calm. Dr. Patel will be in shortly to explain everything. But, honey, you were found 3 days ago on a back road outside Sedona. You were alone. There was no one else with you." "Alone?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "That's impossible. Jake was driving. Emma was in the passenger seat. I was in the back with Connor. We were listening to Emma's road trip playlist. Born to be Wild, Hotel California, all those classic road songs. Connor was taking pictures with his digital camera." I stopped talking because Rosa was looking at me with a mixture of pity and confusion that made my stomach churn. "Sarah," she said gently, "when you were brought in, you didn't have any identification. No purse, no phone, no belongings at all except the clothes on your back. The police ran your fingerprints and found a missing persons report filed in Illinois. You disappeared from Chicago 10 years ago. 10 years. The number hung in the air like a physical presence in the room. My hands instinctively went to my face, feeling along my skin. There were lines around my eyes that hadn't been there before. My hands looked older, more weathered. There was a small scar on my left wrist that I didn't remember getting. "I'm 22, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, they felt false. "I just graduated from Northwestern. I was a journalism major. Jake and we were going to drive to LA so I could interview at some magazines and newspapers. This was supposed to be our big adventure before real life started." Rosa's eyes filled with compassion. "Honey, according to your records, you're 32 years old now. You've been missing for 10 years. The room began to spin. 32, 10 years. Missing. The words crashed around in my brain like pinballs, unable to find a place to settle and make sense. "I need to see a mirror," I whispered. Rosa hesitated, then wheeled over a rolling table with a small mirror attached. When I saw my reflection, I nearly screamed. The face looking back at me was mine, but older, much older. There were fine lines around my eyes, and my hair, which had been shoulder length and dark brown, was now longer, with streaks of premature gray. I looked like my own mother. "What happened to me?" I asked, touching the glass as if I could somehow reach through it to find my younger self. "Where have I been for 10 years? What happened to my friends?" Dr. Patel chose that moment to enter. a soft-spoken man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and the patient demeanor of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news. "Ms. Martinez," he said, pulling up a chair, "I'm Dr. Patel, your neurologist. I understand this is incredibly disorienting, but I need to explain your medical situation. You're suffering from what appears to be dissociative amnesia, likely triggered by severe psychological trauma. Your brain has essentially blocked out the last 10 years as a protective mechanism." Trauma? The word felt foreign in my mouth. "What kind of trauma?" "That's what we're trying to determine," Dr. Patel said carefully. "When you were found, you showed signs of long-term stress and what appeared to be controlled living conditions. There are some physical indicators that suggest, well, we're still running tests." The way he hesitated made my blood run cold. "Controlled living conditions? What does that mean?" "Sarah," Dr. Patel leaned forward, his voice gentle but serious, "we believe you may have been held against your will for an extended period of time. The FBI has been contacted, and they'll want to speak with you once you're medically stable." FBI, held against my will. The words seemed to come from someone else's nightmare, not my life. "My friends," I said desperately, clinging to the one thing that felt real and solid in my mind. "Jake Harrison, Emma Chen, Connor Williams, they were with me. If something happened, they would have called my parents, the police. There would have been searches, investigations." Dr. Patel and Rosa exchanged a look that made my heart sink. "Sarah," Dr. Patel said softly, "there were searches, extensive ones. You and your 3 friends disappeared without a trace somewhere along Route 66 in New Mexico in July 2009. It became national news. But," he paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully, "you're the first one we've found." The implications of that statement hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean, the first one?" "Your friends are still missing, Sarah. You're the only one who's come home." The FBI agents arrived the next morning, like characters from a procedural drama I might have watched in my college dorm room, if college had really been just yesterday instead of a decade ago. Special Agent Patricia Webb was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an efficient manner, while her partner, Agent David Cruz, was younger, with the kind of patient demeanor that probably made him good at interviewing trauma victims. "Sarah, we're going to take this slowly," Agent Webb said, settling into the chair beside my hospital bed. "I know this is overwhelming, but you're our first real lead in a case that's gone cold. Anything you can remember, no matter how small or fragmented, could be crucial." I stared at the digital clock on the wall. 9:47 a.m., Tuesday, July 16th, 2019. The numbers felt meaningless, like they belonged to someone else's life. "I remember getting in Jake's Jeep Cherokee," I began, closing my eyes to focus on the memory. "It was red, well, more like rust-colored. He'd bought it used from some guy in Evanston. Emma had made these elaborate playlists for different parts of the drive, and Connor had just bought this new Canon digital camera. He was obsessed with photography. Agent Cruz was taking notes in a small tablet, another piece of technology that seemed too advanced for what my brain insisted was 2009. "Tell us about the morning you left," Agent Webb prompted. The memory came back with startling clarity. It was July 10th, 2009. We left around 6 a.m. because Jake wanted to beat the Chicago traffic. I remember Emma complaining about having to get up so early and Connor filming everything with his camera. He said he was going to make a documentary about our trip. I paused, watching the agents' faces carefully. "You said they're still missing. All of them?" Agent Webb nodded gravely. "Jake Harrison, Emma Chen, and Connor Williams were last seen on security footage at a gas station in Tucumcari, New Mexico, on July 12th, 2009. Your group bought snacks, filled up the tank, and then vanished. The car was never found. No credit card usage, no cell phone pings, no sightings. It was as if all 4 of you simply ceased to exist." "But I'm here," I said, though the statement felt surreal. "So where have I been for 10 years? And where are my friends?" Dr. Patel had entered during our conversation, carrying a tablet with what appeared to be test results. "Sarah, we've completed some preliminary scans and blood work. There are some concerning findings we need to discuss." He pulled up images on his tablet, brain scans that looked like abstract art to my untrained eyes. "You show signs of long-term stress on your nervous system, and there are traces of various medications in your blood work. Some appear to be sedatives, others are More concerning. What kind of medications? Agent Webb asked, leaning forward with professional interest. Compounds that could be used for memory suppression or behavioral modification, Dr. Patel said carefully. The concentrations suggest regular controlled dosing over an extended period. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Are you saying someone was drugging me for 10 years? It's a possibility we're exploring, Dr. Patel replied. There are also physical indicators, old injection sites, some scarring that suggests medical procedures, nothing life-threatening, but evidence of systematic intervention. I looked down at my arms, now seeing faint marks I'd initially attributed to normal wear and tear. But under closer examination, there was a pattern to them, small, precise scars that looked almost clinical. Agent Cruz spoke up for the first time. Sarah, I know this is difficult, but we need to ask about your last clear memory from the trip. What's the last thing you remember before waking up here? I closed my eyes, trying to push past the fog that seemed to surround everything after Chicago. We were driving through New Mexico. I remember the landscape was so different from Illinois, all red rocks and endless sky. Emma was taking pictures of everything, and Connor was complaining about the heat because the Jeep's air conditioning was broken. The memory felt solid, real, but it was like looking at a photograph with the edges burned away, clear in the center but fading to black around the borders. We stopped for gas in this tiny town. There was an old Route 66 sign that Connor wanted to photograph. Emma bought postcards to send to her grandmother. Jake was complaining about the gas prices. I paused, pressing my fingers to my temples where a headache was beginning to form. Do you remember the name of the town? Agent Webb asked. Tucumcari, I said without hesitation. There was this vintage neon motel sign that Emma absolutely loved. She must have taken 20 pictures of it. The agents exchanged a meaningful look. That matches the security footage we have, Agent Cruz said. What happened after the gas station? This was where the memory became frustrating, like trying to hold water in my hands. We got back in the car. Jake was driving. Emma was navigating with one of those paper maps because GPS wasn't as good then? I frowned, confused by my own words. We were supposed to stop in Albuquerque for the night, but Jake wanted to push through to Flagstaff to save money on hotels. And then? I pressed harder against my temples, trying to force the memories to surface. We were driving. The sun was setting. Emma had put on her evening playlist, slower songs for watching the sunset. I was falling asleep in the back seat. Connor was next to me, editing photos on his camera. Sarah, Agent Webb said gently. What's the next thing you remember after falling asleep in the car? Waking up here, I whispered. 3 days ago, 10 years later. The silence in the room was heavy with implications. Dr. Patel cleared his throat. There's something else, Sarah. We've contacted your parents in Chicago. My heart leaped. Are they coming? When will they be here? They'll be here this afternoon, he said carefully. But I need to prepare you. This has been incredibly difficult for them. Your disappearance, it changed their lives dramatically. Agent Webb added, your case received significant media attention. Your parents became advocates for missing persons, started a foundation, appeared on numerous talk shows and documentaries. They never stopped looking for you. I tried to imagine my parents, my mother with her practical teaching job and love of crossword puzzles, my father with his engineering precision and weekend woodworking projects, thrust into a world of media attention and public advocacy. It seemed impossible. Have they changed a lot? I asked. Dr. Patel's expression was compassionate but serious. Sarah, it's been 10 years. They've aged, obviously. But more than that, losing a child, even temporarily, leaves marks that don't easily heal. They've held on to hope, but they've also had to find ways to keep living with uncertainty. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone, a hospital-issued device since I had no belongings, began to ring. The nurse, Rosa, had taught me how to use it earlier, though the technology seemed impossibly advanced compared to what I remembered. It's them, Rosa said, checking the caller ID. Your parents. My hand trembled as I reached for the phone. In my mind, I was still 22, calling home from college to complain about professors or ask for money. But the voice that answered when I said, hello, belonged to a 32-year-old woman who had been missing for a decade. Sarah? My mother's voice came through the speaker, and I could hear 10 years of pain and hope colliding in that single word. Oh my God, Sarah, is it really you? Hi, Mom, I managed, tears streaming down my face. I'm okay. I'm alive. I'm coming home. But even as I said the words, I realized I had no idea what home meant anymore, or what version of myself would be walking through the door. My parents arrived at 2:47 p.m., and I knew the exact time because I had been watching the digital clock obsessively for 3 hours. When they walked through the door of my hospital room, I understood what Dr. Patel had meant about time leaving its marks. My mother looked like she had aged 20 years instead of 10. Her once dark brown hair, so similar to mine, was now completely gray, pulled back in a style I'd never seen her wear before. She was thinner than I remembered, with new lines around her eyes that spoke of years of worry and sleepless nights. But it was the way she carried herself that startled me most. There was a fragility to her movements that hadn't been there before, as if she might break under any sudden pressure. My father had always been a big man, but now he seemed somehow diminished. His hair had receded significantly, and his face had taken on the weathered quality of someone who had spent years staring at horizons, looking for something that never appeared. "Sarah," my mother whispered, stopping just inside the doorway as if afraid that moving too quickly might make me disappear again. Oh, my baby girl. The endearment hit me like a physical blow. In my mind, I had seen them just days ago when they'd driven me to Chicago to help me move out of my dorm room. They had looked so proud, taking pictures of me in my cap and gown, talking about my bright future in journalism. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice cracking, "I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I don't know where I've been." That broke the spell. My mother rushed to my bedside, her hands shaking as she touched my face as if she needed to confirm I was real. My father hung back for a moment, his eyes filled with tears he was clearly fighting not to shed. "We never stopped looking," my mother said, her voice fierce despite her tears. "Not for one single day. The police said we should consider accepting that you were probably—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "We hired private investigators," my father said, finally approaching the bed. His voice was deeper than I remembered, roughened by years of making phone calls to police departments and following up on leads. "We traveled Route 66 dozens of times, stopped at every gas station, every motel, every diner. We put up flyers from Chicago to Los Angeles." Dr. Patel had warned me that this reunion would be emotional for all of us, but I hadn't been prepared for the weight of their grief. These weren't just my parents who had missed me. They were people whose lives had been fundamentally altered by my disappearance. "Tell us about your friends," my mother said suddenly, sitting on the edge of my bed. "Emma, Jake, Connor, are they okay? Are they coming home too?" The hope in her voice made my heart break. "I don't know, Mom. I don't remember anything from the last 10 years. The doctors think someone was keeping me somewhere, but I can't remember any of it." My father's hands clenched into fists. "Someone took you. For 10 years, someone had our daughter, and we couldn't find her." The pain in his voice was raw, primal. This was a man who had spent a decade feeling like he had failed in the most fundamental way a father could fail. He hadn't been able to protect his child. Agent Webb chose that moment to knock on the door. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but we have some new information that might be helpful." She entered with Agent Cruz and a woman I didn't recognize, someone in her 30s with the tired eyes of a person who had seen too much. "This is Detective Linda Morrison from the New Mexico State Police," Agent Webb said. "She's been working your case since 2009. Detective Morrison stepped forward, and I could see a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal emotion in her expression. "Sarah, I've been looking for you and your friends for 10 years. This is the first break we've had in the case since the gas station surveillance footage." She pulled out a tablet and showed us a grainy security video. "This is the last confirmed sighting we had of your group." On the screen, I watched 4 young people who looked impossibly young to my current eyes. There was Jake, tall and lanky, with his messy brown hair, pumping gas into his rust-colored Jeep. Emma appeared next, her black hair in a ponytail, carrying snacks from the convenience store. Connor was visible in the background, taking pictures of the vintage Route 66 signage. And then there was me, 22 years old, laughing at something Emma had said, completely oblivious to the fact that I was about to vanish from the world for a decade. "What happened after this?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Detective Morrison switched to a different screen, showing a map of New Mexico. "Your group left the gas station at 6:43 p.m. on July 12, 2009. The next confirmed sighting we have is of Jake's Jeep on a traffic camera on Highway 285, heading south toward Roswell, about 2 hours later. Roswell? My father asked. That wasn't on their planned route. No, it wasn't, Agent Cruz confirmed. According to the itinerary you provided during the initial investigation, they should have continued west on I-40 toward Albuquerque. I stared at the map, trying to make sense of the deviation. I don't remember making a decision to go to Roswell. Jake was really focused on sticking to the plan so we wouldn't waste gas money. That's the last trace we have, Detective Morrison continued. The Jeep never appeared on any other traffic cameras, and there were no more credit card transactions. It's as if the vehicle and all 4 occupants simply vanished somewhere between that traffic camera and Roswell. My mother gripped my hand tighter. But Sarah's here. She escaped. Doesn't that mean the others might still be alive somewhere? The agents exchanged looks that didn't fill me with confidence. Agent Webb spoke carefully. We're exploring every possibility, Mrs. Martinez. Sarah's return gives us hope, but we need to understand what happened during those 10 years before we can determine the status of the other victims. Victims, I repeated. The word felt strange in my mouth. Is that what I am? A victim? Dr. Patel, who had been quietly observing the reunion, stepped forward. Sarah, the physical evidence suggests you were held in captivity for an extended period. The controlled medications, the injection sites, the memory suppression. These point to a sophisticated operation designed to keep you compliant and prevent escape. But I'm here now, I said, confusion evident in my voice. How did I escape? Why can't I remember? That's what we're trying to determine, Agent Webb said. The fact that you were found alone on a back road in Sedona with no memory of how you got there suggests something significant happened recently that changed your situation. Detective Morrison leaned forward. Sarah, I need to ask you some specific questions about your physical condition when you woke up. I know this is difficult, but the details might help us understand what happened. I nodded, though my stomach was churning with anxiety. When you woke up, were you wearing your own clothes? I thought back to that first moment of consciousness. No. I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt I didn't recognize. They were clean but worn, like they'd been washed many times. Any injuries? Bruises? Cuts? Some bruises on my arms and legs, but they looked old. And there's this scar on my wrist that I don't remember getting. I held up my left arm, showing the small, precise mark that Dr. Patel had noted during his examination. Agent Cruz was taking notes rapidly. Did you have any belongings with you? Anything at all? Nothing. No purse, no jewelry, no ID, just the clothes. My parents were listening to this exchange with growing horror. My mother's face had gone pale, and my father's jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscles working. One more question, Detective Morrison said gently. This might sound strange, but do you remember having any dreams or nightmares since you've been awake? Sometimes the subconscious processes traumatic memories differently than the conscious mind. I paused, thinking about the fragments of images that had been flashing through my mind since I'd woken up. There are pieces, like looking through fog. I remember white walls, the sound of machines beeping, people in medical scrubs. Sometimes I think I hear Emma crying, but I can't see her. The room fell silent. Agent Webb and Detective Morrison exchanged meaningful looks. What? I asked, alarmed by their expressions. What does that mean? Sarah, Agent Webb said carefully, we think you and your friends may have been held in some kind of medical facility. The controlled medications, the systematic approach, the apparent medical procedures, it all points to an organization with significant resources and medical expertise. Like a hospital? My mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper. More like a private research facility, Agent Cruz said. Unfortunately, there are documented cases of people being held in such facilities for experimental purposes. The word experimental hit me like a physical blow. Are you saying someone was experimenting on me, on us? We don't know for certain, Detective Morrison said quickly. But we're investigating several possibilities, including human trafficking operations that use medical facilities as cover. I felt like the world was spinning around me. In the space of 2 days, I had learned that I had lost 10 years of my life, that my friends were still missing, and now that I might have been used as some kind of human test subject. I want to help, I said suddenly, surprising myself with the firmness of my voice. I want to help you find them. Emma, Jake, Connor, They're still out there somewhere. If someone was experimenting on us, they might still be doing it to my friends. My parents both started to protest, but I held up my hand. I know this is scary, I said, looking directly at my mother and father. I know you just got me back, and the thought of losing me again must be terrifying. But I can't live with myself if I don't do everything possible to help find them. Agent Webb nodded approvingly. We were hoping you'd feel that way. With your cooperation, we might be able to use recovered memories, hypnosis, or other techniques to piece together what happened. What's the next step? I asked. First, you need to recover physically, Dr. Patel interjected. The medications in your system need time to clear, and we need to make sure there are no lasting health effects. Then, Agent Webb continued, we'd like to take you back along Route 66, retracing your original journey. Sometimes returning to familiar locations can trigger memory recovery. Detective Morrison added, and we have some new leads we've been developing. There have been other disappearances along that stretch of highway over the years, people who vanished without a trace, just like you and your friends. Other people? I asked, a chill running down my spine. At least 6 other cases in the past 15 years, she confirmed. All young people traveling alone or in small groups. All disappeared somewhere between Tucumcari and Roswell. The implication was clear. Whoever had taken us was still out there, potentially still taking others. As visiting hours ended, and my parents reluctantly prepared to leave, my mother kissed my forehead and whispered, "We're going to stay in Phoenix until you're ready to come home. We're never letting you out of our sight again." But as I watched them walk out of my hospital room, I realized that home was no longer a simple concept for me. I had been 22 when I left, full of dreams and possibilities. Now I was 32, with a decade of missing memories and 3 best friends who were still trapped wherever I had escaped from. Going home would have to wait until I brought them home too. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the passenger seat of an FBI vehicle, watching the familiar landscape of Route 66 roll past the windows. Agent Webb was driving, while Dr. Sarah Chen, a forensic psychologist, sat in the back seat helping me recover suppressed memories through careful therapy sessions. "Tell me what you're feeling as we approach Tucumcari," Dr. Chen said softly. The gas station sat exactly where I remembered it, though the brand had changed. Standing beside the pumps where Jake's Jeep had been parked 10 years ago, the memories came flooding back with startling clarity. "There," I said, pointing to a spot near the convenience store. Connor stood right there taking pictures while Emma bought postcards for her grandmother. But as we continued south toward the area where we'd disappeared, something more disturbing emerged from my recovering memory. We were driving when Jake saw flashing lights ahead, what looked like an accident. There were people in EMT uniforms flagging us down. The memory crystallized with terrifying clarity. But they weren't real EMTs. They were asking strange questions about us, who we were, where we were going, if anyone was expecting us. Emma realized something was wrong first, but it was too late. They had syringes. Agent Webb's phone immediately rang with Detective Morrison's voice crackling through. "Webb, this changes everything. We're looking at a targeted abduction with sophisticated planning." The gas station owner mentioned that researchers had come by days before our disappearance, asking about traffic patterns and studying routes popular with young travelers. This wasn't random. Someone had been watching us, planning our capture with scientific precision. 2 months later, the breakthrough came at 3:17 a.m. when I woke up screaming from a nightmare that had brought deadly clarity instead of confusion. "I remember where we were held," I told the agents who rushed to my safe house apartment. It was underground, a medical facility built into a cave system. They called it the Longevity Research Institute. White walls, fluorescent lighting, multiple levels. I was kept in what they called the residential wing, rooms that looked like hospital rooms, but with locks on the outside. The memories poured out. There were maybe 15 to 20 other subjects over the years. The staff genuinely believed they were doing important scientific work on stress response, memory formation, and adaptation to controlled environments. After the initial sedation period, they convinced many of us we were contributing to groundbreaking research that would help humanity. My voice cracked as I revealed what had happened to my friends. Emma developed complications from the medications and was transferred to the medical wing. I never saw her again. Jake tried to escape after 3 years and was caught, then transferred to a higher security research environment. Connor adapted the best. By year 5, he was actually helping orient new subjects. Agent Santos discovered the organization was connected to classified military research through defense contractors conducting human performance optimization studies. The facility was located using satellite thermal imaging, buried beneath an abandoned copper mine southeast of Santa Fe. The raid happened on a freezing November morning. From the mobile command post, I listened to radio reports as federal agents descended into the compound. Multiple subjects secured. Facility appears to be in active operation. Then, at 7:23 a.m., we have positive identification on Connor Williams. Subject is alive and responsive. I broke down completely, sobbing with relief. When I was finally allowed to see Connor, he was conscious but sedated, surrounded by doctors and agents. Despite everything, he smiled when he saw me. The same gentle smile from our college days. "Sarah, I'm so glad you made it," he said, taking my hand. "I'm okay. Actually, I'm better than I've been in years. I know that sounds crazy, but this place helped me in ways I never expected." His expression grew sad as he told me about our friends. "Emma got sick about 5 years ago. Her body couldn't handle the medication protocols. She's buried in a memorial garden on the surface. But Jake is alive. He's been transferred to a facility in Colorado. The agents are coordinating his rescue." 3 weeks later, Jake was found and rescued. Unlike Connor's acceptance, Jake carried anger and determination to expose what had been done to us. The investigation revealed the full scope, a classified government program studying human adaptation through controlled long-term isolation. While unethical and illegal, it had produced genuine scientific breakthroughs. Legal proceedings were complex and largely classified, but resulted in the program's shutdown and prosecution of key personnel. The government quietly provided substantial settlements to all victims and families. 6 months later, I stood in a cemetery outside Santa Fe, placing flowers on Emma's grave alongside her parents. Connor and Jake stood with me, along with my parents and Emma's family. "She would have been proud of us," Jake said quietly, "for never giving up, for finding each other again." Connor nodded. "She always said the best stories were about people who found their way home, no matter how long it took." As we walked back to our cars, I realized home had taken on a new meaning. It wasn't a place. It was the people who never stopped looking for you, who never stopped believing you'd find your way back. I was 32 now, with 10 years of memories to process and integrate. But I was alive, I was free, and finally ready to write the next chapter of my story. The road trip that started on Route 66 was complete, though it had taken us through unimaginable places. We had made it home, those of us who could, and Emma's spirit traveled with us, reminding us that some journeys are worth taking, no matter how difficult the road.